Perfect. We are here with Joey Hewitt, aka Find Joe Flow on Instagram. And the backstory here is an interesting one. Joey knocked me out of the NCAA tournament in a very controversial ending. We were just reminiscing on that, but I needed to address that at the start of the podcast, so we don't need to go back to it. Joey is doing an amazing job online talking about the mental side of the game and works with a lot of players from all levels on the mental side and on the skill side. So, Joey, incredibly excited to talk to you and hopefully forge a new memory with our relationship going forward.
Thanks for having me, Mitchell. It's a pleasure. As always, love talking about hoops, the mental game. Yeah, I'm excited for it, man.
I love it. And I know I can say as a player, you were a hooper, and I'm sure you're still hooping. And if any player were to challenge you, you give them some buckets. But I'm sure there were some challenges along the way. So I would love to go into your playing career and the mental challenges you faced, and how did that shape what you do today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a mental performance coach for a reason. It's because I struggled with the mental game growing up. And, you know, when I was growing up as a kid, I was never really that good at basketball or any sports in general. I was pretty mid, as the kids say these days. And, you know, that created a lot of mental issues. The biggest one I would say for me was I was always very short and I was a late bloomer. So to any kids or athletes out there who feel like they're a late bloomer or short or small, I just want to remind you that I struggled with those exact same things and they really affected my confidence, but they don't have to define you. And that's something that really I had to come to terms with. You know, when I was in high school, I was a freshman on freshman. I was a sophomore on JV. And junior year, I finally made varsity. So I wasn't anything special growing up. And it wasn't really until after my junior year in high school when I started to really just connect with my love for the game and really started to grind and work hard at it. And I started to learn the value of hard work. And, you know, I was lucky enough to go play at Whitman College. I had a great career there. It's a Division III school up in Washington State. And it's funny because, you know, I had a great career there, but the start of it was rock bottom for me. When I got to Whitman as a freshman, you know, I was assuming I played D3, you know, I'm going to play right away. You know, that's what my coach promised me. I didn't really have a lot of looks coming out of college or coming out of high school. So I was either going to walk on at a D1 or go play right away at a D3. So I was like, okay, I'll go play right away at a D3. And then I get there and I'm not playing. And that really, really shattered my worldview. It shattered any semblance of confidence I had left. And what happened there is I asked for help, which was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. A lot of athletes, especially male athletes, struggle with that, just being vulnerable. But the moment I opened myself up to be vulnerable was the moment that changed my career. I got in touch with a mental coach who ended up becoming my mentor and helped me get into the field. And he just really, you know, emphasized the mental skills such as breathing techniques, such as self-talk, such as visualizing myself. And I started to really just commit to that part of the game, and everything took off. Everything clicked for me. So my first year in college was rough. It was a grind, and I wasn't seeing results, and I wasn't very confident. But once I started to really connect with the mental game, my sophomore, junior, and senior year went amazingly. I lost 5 games in 3 years, in those 3 years, and it was just really, really a great experience for me. So for me, the mental game has been a roller coaster. It started off as the thing that held me back, and it turned into something that really springboarded me to a new level. And that's really why I fell in love with it. And I was lucky enough to continue playing overseas after that. I got my master's in sports psychology over in England when I was playing. And yeah, at this point now, I'm done playing. Can still give anyone a bucket if they'd like, but I'm more focused on training, doing mental performance coaching and basketball training up here in the Bay Area in California.
Yeah, I really like that story because I think at the Division III level, that is the idea that a lot of people have going into it. You know, all right, if I'm not going D1, I'm going to go D3 and just kill it. And then you go there and you realize that everyone there was a bucket in high school, probably the best player on their team still. And the level is really, really high. And there are a lot of downs there, except the reward of playing isn't as sweet as it is at many of these other places. So we were talking a little bit beforehand about Division III basketball players, especially those that work and grind and make something of your career at a Division III school. I feel like they have learned a work ethic that's very different from anyone else because there's just not as much reward other than the intrinsic rewards of I'm going to go try and be the best I can be. with the situation I'm in. And I think there's a beautiful story with that. And I think it translates afterwards with what you're doing right now and the business that you've built and how many kids you're helping. I would love to quickly go back and tell a story. I don't know if you remember this, but I have a very clear memory before that second round game up at Whitman where I think I went down the wrong hallway and your whole team was in like a dance room and there was music
Yes.
going and you guys were in sync. And at that point, I was like, damn, these dudes are connected. I don't know if the program had an emphasis on the mental side of things, if that came from you, but for sure, the feeling in that room with that you guys created before the game was just this feeling of confidence. You knew what you were about to do and you were going to go do it. Can you talk about that? Was that a pregame ritual? What was that dance room thing?
Yeah, it's funny you say it was a dance room. It was a dance room, and there was a lot of dancing in that room. I think that was just a testament of how we were. You know, we were so, I wouldn't say loose. I mean, we were loose in the sense of we didn't really focus much on the result because I think we had built so much confidence that we were going to win. You know, we were so good and we barely lost in my time there that we didn't even have to focus on winning or losing, which freed our mind up to focus on what our coach, Eric Bridgeland, was so good at instilling in us was just playing with joy. You know, we would visualize before every game and we'd talk about playing with joy all the time, having fun when you're out there. And as I was starting to learn about the mental side of sports, I started to really dive into the research on having fun and just playing with joy. And it's so connected to my experience at Whitman because I was having a lot of fun. We were celebrating each other a lot. Like that was a big staple of our program. And it allowed us to, one, quiet our minds, and two, have a little more looseness within just like the idea of a lot of times athletes get tense in their muscles when they play sports or just their body in general. Having fun is the counter to that. Having fun is a great way to kind of loosen yourself up and remove some of that tension. So I really believe, you know, it's backed by research and it also is just from my experience. That was a huge proponent of our team was just having fun, celebrating everyone, and not really caring about the result. It helped a lot.
Absolutely. Joy is a term that I have used a lot this past year. We actually made it one of our pillars at Elevate Basketball, which is where I run everything in the summer. Because, like you said, I think it is incredibly important from a performance standpoint, but also from a skill standpoint and how you can actually get better faster. And that's, I think, one of the shifts that a lot of our players have made that's been probably the most important in their careers so far. Have you seen any other shifts like that, maybe the focus on joy or any mental shifts that you feel like players need to make if they want to have success at higher levels?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to kind of the other piece of that is not really focusing too much on results or what's at stake. You know, that's probably the thing I hammer home most to athletes that I work with, especially younger athletes, because it is something that is ingrained in sports. I mean, we are trained to focus on results. When we grow up, all we see is results. If you watch Sports Center, all you're going to see is the stats, the numbers, the wins, the losses, you know, the highlights of the good plays, the makes. You're not going to see really the process it takes to get there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is probably the biggest thing within sports that is the hardest to do because everything about your upbringing tells you to focus on results within sports. You know, it's just like it's how you get minutes, it's how you play, it's how you get recognized, you know, but it's so ironic because that doesn't mean you should focus on it. And I think it took me a long time to get there. It honestly took me beyond college to get there. When I first started learning about the mental game, that was the thing I was really, really struggling with, even though I was aware of all of the ideas and I agreed with it. I was like, yeah, I shouldn't focus on scoring, which was the result for me, the specific one I attached to a lot, but I still did it. I would know how many points I had. I'd constantly remind myself, like, I just need 10 more. Like, I just need 10. I just need 10. Let me get to 10. And it really did hinder me more than I realized. I didn't know until I was 24, 25 years old, though, once I really started to detach from all of that stuff. So I'd say that's probably the biggest one that athletes everywhere at all levels struggle with. We focus too much on results. It doesn't mean you shouldn't care about results, but in the heat of the competition, when your shoes are laced up and you got your jersey on and the tip-off has happened, results serve you no good at that point. So I think it's a really important detail to understand is like you can focus on results, you can like them, but the more you get attached to them, the more you're going to think about them in the midst of competition. And the more you think in the midst of competition, the worse you're going to play.
What would be some practical ways to make that switch? Like I've heard the example of the pink elephant, right? When someone says, don't think of a pink elephant, everyone automatically thinks of it. So then the question is, if you don't want to focus on the results, where can you put your focus so that you're not thinking about the results? Because it's hard to just not think of something, but like where do you encourage players to put their focus?
Hey, I just want to take a quick break. My name's Russell. I'm one of the founders of CoachIQ. We put on this podcast here. Our goal is to interview top coaches and business owners in the youth sports space across the United States and give you guys insight on the ground floor. How are they running their business? What do they think about the current ecosystem? And what are their thoughts on where things are going? So we're super excited to bring this to you guys. If you don't know about us, we are an all-in-one sports management platform. We run a lot of the businesses that we have on the podcast. And we're fortunate enough now to work with about 1,000 sports coaches across the United States. And it's our goal to make your life as easy as possible in running the business itself. Website, scheduling, payment management, everything handled seamlessly on our platform. And really what separates us is we are built specifically for sports. We're not powering nail salons. We're not powering Pilates studios. Every second of the day, we focus on you. So if that's something you need where you're looking to get your time back or you're looking to actually grow your business, CoachIQ is really the only platform thinking about you every single day, interviewing and working with the top coaches in the industry, specific to sports. So if that's something we can help you with, we would love to connect with you. You can visit our website, coachiq.com, schedule a free demo there. The demos are awesome. It's really less about selling and much more about just walking through what we've learned and providing value on what other coaches are doing. And if it's a match, it's a match. So absolute no-brainer. Go schedule a demo, totally worth the time. And thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for customers who are working with us. It allows us to do all this, make better product. And the main goal, help athletes all across the United States and the world get a phenomenal experience from you guys, the coaches.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of people do that. You know, I one of my big principles within my work with athletes is I don't like the word don't. I don't like anything that they write down. If it starts with don't, like don't make a mistake, don't mess up, your brain's going to think about the other side of it just naturally. So I would say the two things that I would answer to that are actually connected to the same principle, which is really just a common phrase that you've heard from every coach in America or England. Next play. Next play mentality to me is the number one counter to that, because think about results and where they bring you. A lot of the time when you miss a shot, you're living in the past. You're thinking about that result that just happened instead of focusing and putting all of your energy onto what you're going to do next. The other thing I think that really helps me, especially, you know, when I was focused on scoring a lot, was a simple breath. When you think about focus, it doesn't have to be something necessarily philosophical or through language, you know. Focus can be through feeling as well. And I think I found a lot of benefit through, I would be focusing on scoring, I would use a breath as a reset. So really what I'm saying through both of those things, I'm going to focus on being present. I'm going to focus on the moment in front of me, because results are damn near always in the future or the past. You're thinking about the points you want to score or the shot you just missed. You're thinking about how you want to win the game or how you've lost to this team before, so it's going to be a tough game. You know, we all live in fear in sports for the most part because we project the past into the future. We use the past and go to the future from that past experience. The problem there is you're skipping the most important part of life. You're never living in the present. So to me, I think that is the number one thing, is like, how do you get rid of results? You got to be in the moment. And I think it connects as well to having fun and joy. When you're having fun and focused on supporting each other and just building up that positive energy, results don't really matter as much.
I love how everything connects and it makes so much sense. I would love to actually dig into being present a bit more. And I told you this before the podcast. I want to brainstorm a bit because I've heard being present probably from every single coach, every basketball coach, every strength coach, every psychologist I've talked to. There seems to be this universal opinion that being present is probably the most important thing for optimal performance. And when I look at this from a guy who comes from more of the skill side and skill acquisition science, my view is that skill is effective self-organization. So your body is taking in all this information from the environment. You have a general idea of what you're trying to go accomplish. Put the ball in the basket, move your body in front to stay in front of your offensive player as a defender. We have the idea of what to do, but there's an environment and there's an individual, and you're needing to self-organize within that environment to execute this task. If you are present, I think that gives your body the best chance to move and execute those skills. So not only is it the reason or going to help you from a mental side, but I think physically you're going to be doing things that are more productive towards the game. I would love if you could talk or critique that thought process, or maybe brainstorm a bit on why is being present so universally agreed upon as a positive thing.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, man. Like, think about when you're playing hesitantly or when you're playing indecisively in sports. That's a physical thing. Maybe you tense up, maybe you feel like a little jittery. It's a physical, physiological response to being in the past or the future. And I know you're in the past and the future because a lot of the time when we overthink or when we hesitate, we're thinking. Like, a lot of those times we are thinking about things. So when you have being present coupled with the idea of just instinctual movement, now you're creating a lot of realistic things that are going to happen in a game. In a game, the more you think, especially in a standpoint of like basketball, if you're attacking the basket or if you're playing defense, thoughts do not help you in that moment. They don't. They only will hinder you and make you overthink and play hesitantly, like I mentioned. So, yeah, I think it's like every athlete has talked about the zone, like they all know what that feels like. But I'm not sure how many athletes understand that really what that is being fully immersed in the present moment. It truly is the greatest feeling in the world. And it is something that I'm sure both of us have felt before. And the reason why it is so great is because we're not thinking. So if you can train that, like through basketball training, the best way to train that is like the stuff you do. I think, I use a lot of your stuff with my work with athletes on the court as well. Like just being able to get them to play without thinking. And the best way to do that is to be present. So even like taking a breath before you do a rep, I think is a great way to just clear your mind and reset. And now you're connecting the mind and the body. The one critique I will mention, or something that I've gotten a lot, and I've felt this before as a player, is there are times when people feel too present and they feel like being present makes them almost feel kind of like zoned out, where they're just kind of there. They're not having any fire to their game. They're just emotionless. And I've had a lot of players tell me, I agree with being present, but sometimes I get too far into that. And sometimes I feel like I'm just kind of just there and I don't have any agency and I'm not really thinking at all, which isn't allowing me to get out of the situation I'm in.
Right.
So I'm curious to hear if you've heard that before and what your thoughts are on that, because that's something I've heard a lot from especially high level athletes.
It's funny you mention it because this summer was one time where that did come up. And again, it was with a high level athlete who he'd played high major, multiple different schools, think top of the top programs, the Blue Bloods. He had played there for many years on some Final Four teams. And it almost was like he was just burnt out. Like whatever the hormones or the chemicals in your body are to compete that drive you to have motivation to strive for something, they were totally depleted. I don't know necessarily what it was, but we took some time where we took away a lot of the results. We took away all the metrics of success or failure for months, and we just focused on joy and playing basketball for the reason he started to play as a young kid and fell in love with it. And I think that helped to reset a bit. But I do agree to that point. Like, I think there is something to just the over competition where you play a high school season, you put all your emotion into that, and you go straight into AAU. You're competing. And then you go fall, and now they're having fall AAU. So you're playing games. And I think what either happens is people get burnt out, or the games that should matter don't matter because you've just played so many. And I think maybe having times built into a year or having times built into workouts where, hey, this one we're not going to focus on competing. There's no winner, there's no loser, as contrary it is to me to say that as someone who loves to compete. But I think it is good to have those resets. And it's really important from the mental side too, to understand, all right, this is now not time to be competing. Like, we can compete for an hour, but then the rest of the day, like, let's shut it down. So maybe turn off social media, go for a walk in nature, find ways that's really low stimulus to just disconnect a bit so you can kind of replenish those stores of motivation. That's just a thought or a hypothesis, but it's a great point and something that I think is really important as we see young hoopers who are so stimulated every waking hour, from their phone to playing to school to whatever else it is.
That's why I think it's really about balance. That's such a big part of the mental game to me. It's about balance. It's not black and white, and you can be too far into being present. You can be too far into like competing to the point where you burn out. That's why, I like to use the terms fire and flow. And that's really where I'm trying to tap into every time I step onto the court. I'm just monitoring my fire and my flow. To me, my flow and my fire can both bring me to the present moment, but they do it in different ways. My fire is letting that emotion out and really competing. But if you do that the whole time, you're going to burn out, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
So I think having the balance is the key. And that's something that's a skill. All athletes can learn how to do that. Skills are they're far beyond fundamentals of dribbling, shooting, and rebounding. The skills that are really important in basketball are skills that no one talk about. To me, it's really like being present, responding from mistakes, being able to handle a situation no matter what you're in, basically adaptability.
Yep.
And I can go on, but like to me, those are the skills that will put you in position to play a high level basketball.
Absolutely.
That's more important when you get up to the higher levels.
Absolutely, because like we talked about, everybody's good. Everybody's good at the sport. So what's going to differentiate? And that term fire and flow, I connect with so much. I think Duncan Robinson is one of the greatest shooters ever because he has that ability. He has that skill to understand when he's in flow and he can stay in it. And when he's not, he uses almost like a fire. Like he fires himself up to put him back to that flow state. And so it's really interesting watching him in a workout. To get himself going, he'll take his time in between reps or in between games and like give himself a pep talk. Maybe he'll say some things, say some explicits. And then as soon as it's go time, he's back to this peace. And he's back to that balance, and he has the emotional flexibility or whatever you want to call it to kind of self-regulate to put him in the optimal zone of performance, which is, I think, incredibly important when you're shooting, especially because that requires some touch. It's not just something where you can grind it out like maybe on defense where you could just fire yourself up and you'll perform that at an adequate level. But man, love this conversation, love the flow of it. I think we should absolutely run it back. I want to end with understanding what it's like as a player to come to you and work with you. What does that entail, assuming I'm in person? And then what does that entail, assuming I'm far away from you? And how would I still be able to work with you?
Yeah, based in the Bay Area, California. So in person, a lot of a blend of mental training and basketball training. That's something that I am really passionate about. It's something that I don't see a lot of trainers do. And it's a great way for me to distinguish myself as just different. I really, really believe in the idea that you can train the mind while training your basketball skills. It's actually a little bit better to train your mind while you're training your basketball skills because you're going to need to use those mental skills in the heat of the moment. So I have a website that's findjoeflow.com. I have an Instagram, findjoeflow. And online, a lot of what I do is the mental side. I meet with athletes on Zoom throughout the course of a season. We learn the mental skills, which is really how it is. That's how it is structured. It's mental skills training. But really, it's like, just a way for an athlete to air out their thoughts, to talk to me about the season, talk to a third party, an unbiased third party, and then learn some things that can help them on the court, whether it be journaling techniques, breathing exercises, learn how to effectively visualize. And then the goal is to just continue to train the mind in those sessions. So in person, online, I think it's all really just about spreading the awareness of the mental game. My Instagram, just going to my Instagram and going through the feed will help you kind of open your mind to the mental game. I just post a bunch of pro athletes talking about the mental game or exuding the mental game through their actions. So yeah, that's generally how I do it. But I think the goal in general, and I love what you're doing too, is just to like, can we evolve the training field? Can we evolve player development? It doesn't have to just be stationary ball handling and getting shots up. You can do ball handling with a tennis ball and you can do shots with pressure, make 5 out of 8. So I think just doing that type of stuff, if you're an athlete, putting more pressure on yourself in training is a great way to train the mind.
Yeah, I really appreciate how you're pushing the envelope. And I want to second, going to your Instagram is a great Instagram to be at. Whether you're just looking for some motivation or you want to set up your algorithm to promote more positive things, I think following at Find Joe Flow is one of the best follows there is right now. So really appreciate you coming on. We've plugged the Instagram a bit. We've plugged your website, but just for one final plug, give us, where can people contact you?
Those two for sure. And something that I think a lot of people do is, shoot me a DM on Instagram. I'm pretty good with my DMs. So if you have any questions on the mental game, if you have any just like ideas or anything that you're curious about, please feel free to reach out via Instagram. I think that, especially athletes and parents of athletes, they see a lot of stuff on Instagram now. So like you said, being able to kind of curate your feed or change the algorithm a bit, I promise you it'll be positive stuff in your life.
All right, Joey, I appreciate you coming on, and we'll absolutely run it back one time soon.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you having me, man. Thank you.